When my daughter looked me straight in the eyes and said, "The house is mine now. You have 48 hours to pack your things and leave," I collapsed right there on our Persian rug. 3 days later, I was sleeping in my car outside the mansion I'd called home for 35 years. That's when I realized family ties are like designer handbags. Some are authentic, others just expensive counterfeits waiting to be exposed. If you're watching this, hit subscribe and tell me where you're from. Because trust me, this story twists more than a contortionist at the circus, and you'll want to be here when my daughter realizes exactly who she messed with. My name is Clara Beaumont, and until last month, I was living what most would call a charmed life. Our estate in Westbrook Hills was the envy of everyone who drove past its wrought iron gates. My husband Philippe had built an empire in real estate development over 4 decades, and I'd been by his side through every triumph and setback. We had one daughter, Julia, who I'd given everything to: the best schools, extravagant sweet 16ths, a fully paid Ivy League education, and most importantly, a mother's unconditional love. Philippe's death was sudden. A heart attack on the golf course at 68. One minute he was laughing with his business partners about their upcoming Miami project. The next, he was gone. I was devastated, but I had to stay strong for Julia. She flew in from New York immediately, and for those first few days, we grieved together. She held my hand at the funeral while I struggled to maintain my composure in front of 400 mourners. "We'll get through this together, Mom," she had whispered, squeezing my fingers as they lowered Philippe's casket. I believed her. The reading of the will was scheduled for 2 weeks after the funeral. I wasn't worried about the financial aspects. Philippe and I had built everything together. Our partnership agreement was clear, and we discussed our plans extensively. Julia would inherit a substantial trust, but our main assets would remain with me until my passing. At least, that's what I thought we'd arranged with our longtime attorney, Martin Goldstein. I'll never forget that afternoon. The air conditioning in Martin's office was blasting, yet I was sweating through my black dress. Julia sat beside me, her posture stiff, checking her phone repeatedly as Martin organized his papers. Script part separator, Before we begin, Martin said, adjusting his glasses, I want to express my condolences again. Philippe was not just a client, but a dear friend. I nodded, dabbing at my eyes with a tissue. Thank you, Martin. Let's proceed. He cleared his throat and began reading the formal legal language. I half listened, my mind drifting to memories of Philippe and I planning our retirement travel, the villa in Tuscany we'd been eyeing, the Mediterranean cruise we'd never take. Martin's voice suddenly cut through my thoughts. And to my beloved daughter, Julia Beaumont, I hereby bequeath the entirety of my estate, including all properties, business holdings, investments, and liquid assets. My head snapped up. I'm sorry, what did you just say? Julia turned to me, her expression unreadable. There must be some mistake, I stammered, looking frantically between Martin and my daughter. Martin continued reading. To my wife, Clara Beaumont, I leave a monthly allowance of $10,000 to be managed by my daughter, with the provision that she may adjust this amount as she sees fit. The room began to spin. This couldn't be happening. Philippe and I had agreed. We'd signed papers. I turned to Julia, expecting her to look as shocked as I felt. Instead, she smiled tightly and reached for my hand. I'll take care of you, Mom. Don't worry. This is impossible, I said, my voice rising. Philippe and I had an agreement. We signed documents together. Check your files, Martin. Martin shifted uncomfortably. This will supersede all previous arrangements. It was signed and notarized 6 months ago. 6 months ago? And you never thought to mention this to me? I stared at him in disbelief. Client confidentiality, Clara. I couldn't discuss it with you. I turned to my daughter. Julia, you know this isn't what your father would want. This has to be a mistake. Her face hardened. It's exactly what Daddy wanted. He told me everything, Mom. About how you were always pushing him to take risks he didn't want to take. How you nearly bankrupted him twice with your spending. Script part separator, My jaw dropped. What are you talking about? I helped build this empire alongside your father. Martin cleared his throat again. There's more. Philippe left a letter explaining his decision. He slid a sealed envelope across the mahogany desk. With trembling hands, I tore it open and began reading Philippe's familiar handwriting. Clara, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I've made this difficult decision to protect our legacy. Over the years, I've watched you become increasingly reckless with our finances. The charity galas where you donated in my name without consulting me. The vacation homes purchased on impulse. The loans to your sister that were never repaid. Julia has shown the business acumen and responsibility you lack. I'm sorry, but this is for the best. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. These accusations were outrageous. The donations were always joint decisions. The properties were investments Philippe had approved. And my sister's loans? Philippe had insisted we help her after her divorce. This isn't my husband's writing, I said, voice quivering. Someone manipulated him. Julia stood up, smoothing her designer skirt. I know this is shocking, Mom, but Dad and I talked about this extensively. He was worried about you handling the estate. You discussed this behind my back. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. He was protecting his life's work, she replied coldly. Martin interjected, the will is legally binding, Clara. I suggest you take some time to process this. I walked out of that office feeling like I'd entered an alternate reality. For 35 years, Philippe and I had shared everything. How could he do this? And Julia, my sweet daughter who once couldn't sleep without her stuffed rabbit I'd sewn back together countless times, how could she look at me with such detachment? 3 days later, Julia arrived at the mansion with her husband, Derek, and a document requiring my signature. What's this? I asked, not inviting them further than the foyer. The house transfer papers, Derek explained, his corporate lawyer voice clipped and efficient. Julia is exercising her right to claim the property immediately. Script part separator, I won't leave my home, I said, standing my ground. This is ridiculous, Julia. You grew up here. How can you do this? Julia's eyes flashed. Mom, don't make this harder than it needs to be. The house is mine now. You have 48 hours to pack your things and leave. I felt like I'd been slapped. 48 hours? To leave the home where I'd raised her? Where every corner held memories. You can't be serious, I whispered. Derek stepped forward. We can arrange temporary accommodations for you while you find an apartment that fits your new budget. I looked at my daughter, searching for any sign of the loving child I'd raised. But her eyes were cold, calculating, a stranger wearing my daughter's face. You need to sign these papers, Mom, Julia insisted, tapping a manicured nail on the document. Dad's signature is all over the estate planning. This is happening whether you cooperate or not. I need time to consult with my own attorney, I said, trying to steady my voice. Julia laughed, actually laughed. Mom, with what money? Your accounts have already been frozen pending the transfer. The allowance hasn't been set up yet. And Dad's lawyer works for me now. That's when reality crashed down on me. Philippe hadn't just betrayed me in death, he'd left me completely vulnerable. I had no access to funds. My credit cards were joint accounts. Even my car was in his name. I'll give you until Sunday, Julia said, checking her watch. Derek will return with a moving crew to help pack your essentials. The rest stays with the house. As they turned to leave, Julia paused at the door. Oh, and Mom. The country club has been informed that your membership is being transferred to my name. So don't try to charge anything there. The door closed behind them, and I sank to the floor, surrounded by the life I was about to lose. Script part separator, I spent that night frantically gathering what mattered most. Photo albums, my jewelry, Philippe's love letters from our early years. Evidence of the life I thought we'd shared. By morning, I was exhausted, my eyes swollen from crying. I tried calling friends, but news travels fast in our social circle. Most didn't pick up. Those who did sounded uncomfortable, making vague promises to catch up soon. My sister Elaine was my only hope. When I called, she sounded genuinely distressed. Clara, my God, I just heard. Come stay with me. 2 hours later, I was sitting in her modest kitchen, telling her everything. There's something wrong here, she said, refilling my wine glass. Philippe adored you. Remember how he surprised you with that anniversary trip to Venice? That wasn't a man planning to cut you off. Julia mentioned your loans, I said quietly. In Philippe's supposed letter. Elaine's face fell. Clara, I paid those back 3 years ago. Philippe insisted I did. I have the receipts to prove it. A chill ran down my spine. So either Philippe lied in that letter, or someone else wrote it, Elaine finished. That night, sleeping on my sister's pull-out couch, I made a decision. I wouldn't go quietly. I'd built that fortune alongside Philippe, sacrificed for it, nurtured it. If Julia wanted war, she'd get one. The next morning, I called every attorney in town. Most refused when they heard I was going against the Beaumont estate. Finally, a young lawyer named Rebecca Chen agreed to meet me. I can't pay you now, I admitted during our consultation. But when I win. Let's talk contingency, she interrupted, eyes sharp. I've wanted to take down Martin Goldstein for years. He's not as clean as people think. For the first time since that horrible will reading, I felt a flicker of hope. I didn't know then that this was just the beginning, that what I discover about Philippe, Julia, and the empire we'd built would shake my world to its core. Script part separator, Rebecca wasted no time. By that afternoon, she'd filed an emergency petition to freeze the estate transfer and secure me temporary living expenses. But Julia was already moving at lightning speed. When I returned to the mansion to retrieve more belongings, I found the locks changed and 2 security guards at the gate. Mrs. Beaumont, I'm sorry, but we have orders not to let you in, one said apologetically. This is my home. I protested, my voice breaking. Not according to our employer, the other guard replied coldly. I sat in my car, staring at the house where I'd spent half my life, now forbidden to me. Through the gates, I could see moving trucks. They were already clearing out my things. My phone buzzed with a text from Julia. Your personal items are being boxed and will be delivered to Aunt Elaine's. The rest stays. Stop making this difficult. The humiliation burned worse than the betrayal. News of my situation had spread through our social circle like wildfire. My phone filled with messages, some sympathetic, others gleefully curious about the scandal. That evening, Rebecca called with troubling news. Clara, we have a problem. The judge assigned to our case is Harold Winters. What does that mean? I asked. He plays golf with Martin Goldstein every Sunday, she sighed. And his daughter works for one of Philippe's companies. So he won't help us? He's already denied our emergency petition. Says the will appears valid on its face. I felt the walls closing in. What options do we have? We dig deeper, Rebecca said firmly. Something doesn't add up. Philippe changed his will suddenly after decades of different plans? We need to find out why. That night, as I lay awake on Elaine's couch, my phone lit up with an unknown number. Hello. I answered hesitantly. Mrs. Beaumont. A man's voice whispered. My name is Thomas. I worked in accounting for your husband. We need to meet. There are things you should know about the company's finances, and about your daughter's involvement. Script part separator, I arranged to meet Thomas at a coffee shop 30 minutes outside town. He was younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s, with nervous eyes that constantly scanned the room. Mrs. Beaumont, thank you for coming, he said, sliding a flash drive across the table. Everything's here. Financial records from the last 3 years that never made it to the official books. What am I looking at exactly? I asked. He lowered his voice. About 18 months ago, your daughter started taking a more active role in the company. She convinced your husband to let her handle some of the newer developments. But the numbers never added up. My heart raced. Are you saying Julia was embezzling? Not exactly. Thomas glanced around nervously. She was funneling money through shell companies. Companies owned by her husband Derek's family. They've been skimming millions off the top of every new development. Philippe would have noticed, I insisted. Thomas shook his head. He was sick, Mrs. Beaumont. Sicker than he let on. For the last year, he was barely at the office. Julia handled everything. Sick? What are you talking about? He died of a heart attack. He had heart problems for over a year. Didn't you know? The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Philippe hadn't told me he was ill. We'd slept in the same bed every night, and he'd kept this from me. There's more, Thomas continued. 2 weeks before he died, your husband started asking questions about the financial discrepancies. He scheduled a full audit. And then he suddenly changed his will, I whispered, pieces falling into place. The day after he announced the audit, Thomas confirmed. Julia was panicking. I overheard her arguing with Derek about what would happen if her father discovered what they'd done. As I drove back to Elaine's, my mind raced. Had Julia manipulated a sick Philippe into changing his will? Or was there something even more sinister at play? The Philippe I knew would never have cut me off, but perhaps I hadn't known the real Philippe at all. When I pulled into Elaine's driveway, a police car was waiting. Script part separator, Clara Beaumont. Detective Reeves, the officer introduced himself. I need to ask you some questions about your husband's death. My stomach dropped. Why are you investigating Philippe's death? His medical examiner flagged some inconsistencies, he explained. Given recent developments with the estate, we're taking a closer look. Inside Elaine's house, Detective Reeves revealed what they'd found. Philippe's toxicology report showed unusual levels of his heart medication in his system. Are you suggesting someone tampered with his medication? I asked, feeling sick. We're exploring all possibilities, he said carefully. When millions of dollars are involved, Mrs. Beaumont, motives can become complicated. After he left, I called Rebecca and explained everything. Thomas's revelations and now the police investigation. This changes everything, she said excitedly. We need to petition the court to halt all transfers pending a criminal investigation. But Julia had anticipated this move. The next morning, I woke to breaking news on the local station. Widow challenges late husband's will, claims daughter orchestrated his death. The reporter stood outside our mansion, Julia beside her, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face. These accusations are horrible, she sobbed. My mother has been unstable since Dad died. He changed his will because he was worried about her mental state. Now she's proving him right with these terrible allegations. My phone exploded with calls, former friends horrified by what they were hearing, reporters seeking comment. Even Elaine looked at me with new uncertainty. Did you talk to the press about Julia being involved in Philippe's death? She asked. Of course not. I was devastated. Not only was Julia stealing my life, but she was also destroying my reputation in the process. That afternoon, I received an official letter. Julia was filing for a restraining order against me, claiming she feared for her safety given my unhinged accusations. Script part separator, It felt like I was drowning in quicksand. The more I struggled, the deeper I sank. The restraining order was approved that same day. I couldn't go within 500 feet of my own home or contact Julia directly. Rebecca was furious. This is a classic intimidation tactic, she fumed, pacing Elaine's living room. They're trying to make you look unstable to discredit anything you might reveal. Thomas flash drive. We need to decode these financial records immediately. Rebecca brought in a forensic accountant named Marcus who worked through the night. By morning, he had confirmation. Nearly $14 million had been siphoned from the company over 18 months through a labyrinth of transactions. This is sophisticated money laundering, Marcus explained, pointing at his laptop screen. The money ended up in offshore accounts linked to a company called Meridian Ventures. And who owns Meridian Ventures? I asked. On paper, a man named Lawrence Fletcher. But he's Derek's uncle. It was the smoking gun we needed, but before we could act, Julia made her next move. A formal letter arrived demanding I return stolen company documents and threatening criminal charges for corporate espionage. Thomas called in a panic. They know I gave you information. I've been fired, and Derek threatened me personally. I miscarried, Mr. Beaumont. That night, someone broke into Elaine's house while we were having dinner at a restaurant. My room was ransacked, my computer stolen. The message was clear. They were looking for the flash drive. Detective Reeves took the break-in seriously. This isn't just about money anymore. Someone's getting desperate. Script part separator, When the police left, e sate elan sport swing, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on me. My own daughter was willing to destroy me to cover her crimes. You need protection, Rebecca insisted when I called her. These people aren't playing games anymore. She arranged for a private security guard and helped me move to a small apartment under an assumed name. I felt like I was living in some bizarre crime drama instead of my own life. The next day, I received an unexpected call from Caroline Winters, Judge Winters' wife and my former friend from the country club. Clara, we need to meet, she whispered. Not over the phone. We arranged to meet at a diner 2 towns over. Caroline looked nervous, constantly checking over her shoulder. Harold doesn't know I'm here, she said, clutching her coffee cup. But I overheard something at our dinner party last night. Martin Goldstein was drunk and bragging about how he'd helped Philippe hide assets from you for years. My blonde hunkled. Hide assets? What do you mean? Apparently, Philippe had another family, she said quietly. A woman in Seattle with twin boys. Martin helped him set up trusts for them that you never knew about. I nearly knocked over my water glass. That's impossible. We were married for 35 years. I'm sorry, Clara. Martin showed photos to Harold. The boys are teenagers now. The revelation shattered something fundamental inside me. Not only had I lost my home, my money, and my daughter, now I was losing the very memory of my marriage. There's more, Caroline continued. Julia knows about them. She's been in contact with the woman for months. That's how she convinced Philippe to change the will, by threatening to tell you about his other family if he didn't. Script part separator, When I returned to my borrowed apartment, I stared at our wedding photo, the one possession I'd managed to save from the mansion. The smiling man beside me was suddenly a stranger. Had Philippe really maintained a second family for years? Was our entire marriage built on lies? I called Rebecca immediately and told her everything. This actually helps our case, she said, voice tense with excitement. If Julia blackmailed Philippe into changing his will, we can have it invalidated. The next morning, Rebecca filed motions to subpoena all of Philippe's travel records and phone logs for the past 20 years. Julia's attorneys fought back viciously, but the judge, a different one this time, ruled in our favor. Within days, the evidence was undeniable. For 18 years, Philippe had made monthly 3-day trips to Seattle. The phone records showed daily calls to the same number. Credit card statements revealed jewelry purchases, school tuition payments, even a house. I spent an entire day vomiting, my world completely dismantled. How had I been so blind? My security guard interrupted my grief with urgent news. Martin Goldstein had been arrested on charges of financial fraud unrelated to our case. The district attorney was offering deals to anyone who could provide evidence against him. This is our chance, Rebecca insisted. We need to find everyone who might know about Martin's dealings with Philippe. I remembered Philippe's longtime secretary, Marion, who'd retired 3 years ago. After some searching, I found her living in a retirement community upstate. When I arrived at her door, her face registered immediate concern. I've been watching the news, Clara. I'm so sorry about everything. Over tea, she confirmed what I suspected. Martin and Philippe had conspired for years to hide assets. But it wasn't just about the other woman, Marion revealed. Philippe was involved in some questionable business deals, bribing city officials for building permits, cutting corners on safety regulations. Martin helped cover it all up. And Julia, did she know? Marion's face hardened. Julia found out everything last year. She didn't just blackmail Philippe about his other family. She threatened to expose his business practices too. I felt a strange mixture of pain and vindication. My daughter was a blackmailer, but my husband had been a criminal and a cheat. Script part separator, As I drove back from Marion's, my phone buzzed with a text from Detective Reeves, need to meet immediately. Breakthrough in case. At the police station, he slid a folder across the table. We've been investigating Philippe's heart medication. The toxicology showed levels that could have triggered his heart attack. We've traced the tampered pills. Someone killed him. My voice sounded distant, even to myself. Not just someone. He pushed forward a security camera photo showing Derek entering our home 3 days before Philippe's death. "We have a warrant for your son-in-law's arrest." Within hours, the news exploded. Derek was taken into custody while leaving his office. Julia screamed at reporters, calling it a setup. Public opinion shifted dramatically. People who'd shunned me were suddenly calling, offering support. The next morning, Thomas contacted me again. "They're destroying documents at the office." Julia's ordered everything shredded. Rebecca immediately filed for an emergency injunction. By noon, federal agents were raiding the company headquarters, seizing computers and files before they could disappear. That evening, while watching the coverage, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. "Clara, this is Susan Beaumont." Her voice was hesitant. "Philippe's other wife." The world stopped spinning for a moment. "I think we should meet," she continued. "There are things you need to know about Julia's visits here. About the promises she made to my sons if they helped her." "Your sons are involved in this too?" I whispered. Julia promised them recognition as Philippe's legitimate heirs if they helped pressure him to change his will. Now she's refusing to acknowledge them. "We've been played just like you." As I hung up, I realized the conspiracy was larger than I'd imagined. Julia hadn't just betrayed me, she'd manipulated an entire hidden family, then discarded them too. Script part separator The courthouse was packed on Monday morning. Julia arrived with a new legal team, her third since the scandal broke. Derek had been released on bail, looking haggard in a suit that suddenly seemed too large for his frame. I sat with Rebecca, Susan unexpectedly beside me, her teenage sons watching their half-sister with undisguised contempt. Judge Lancaster, a stern woman known for her no-nonsense approach, addressed the courtroom. "Given the extraordinary circumstances surrounding this case, including ongoing criminal investigations, I'm ordering all assets of the Beaumont estate frozen effective immediately." Julia shot to her feet. "Your Honor, that's completely unnecessary. My father's wishes were clear." "Sit down, Ms. Beaumont," the judge snapped. "Your father's wishes are precisely what's in question here. Evidence suggests undue influence at best, criminal coercion at worst." As we exited the courthouse, reporters swarmed around us. One thrust a microphone toward me. "Mrs. Beaumont, how does it feel knowing your husband had another family?" I paused, feeling Susan tense beside me. With sudden clarity, I realized she'd been as deceived as I had been. "Philippe Beaumont betrayed many people," I said calmly. "But today isn't about him. It's about justice for everyone his daughter manipulated." That afternoon, Martin Goldstein accepted a plea deal, agreeing to testify against Derek and Julia in exchange for reduced charges. His sworn statement detailed how Julia had discovered her father's secret family and financial improprieties, using both to pressure him into changing his will. She told Philippe she'd have him arrested if he didn't sign, Martin admitted. When he threatened to change it back after consulting with Clara, things escalated quickly. By evening, Derek broke. Facing decades in prison for Philippe's death, he turned on Julia, claiming she'd masterminded everything, including tampering with her father's medication. The courtroom fell silent as Julia was led away in handcuffs, her designer outfit replaced with an orange jumpsuit. The judge's gavel echoed through the chamber as she announced the verdict: guilty on all counts of fraud, coercion, and conspiracy to commit murder. 25 years without possibility of parole. I felt no joy watching my daughter's downfall, only a profound sadness for what greed had done to our family. 6 months later, I sat on the terrace of what was once again my home. The estate had been returned to me, along with control of Philippe's legitimate businesses. Susan and her sons received substantial settlements, enough to secure their futures while I maintained the family legacy. Thomas now runs our financial department. Rebecca has become not just my attorney but a dear friend. Even Detective Reeves stops by occasionally for coffee. Yesterday, I received my first letter from Julia. The prison chaplain had apparently encouraged her to seek forgiveness. Her handwriting, once so confident, appeared shaky on the page. "Mom, I don't expect you to forgive me. But I need you to know I'm sorry. Greed consumed me until I couldn't recognize myself anymore. I haven't decided if I'll write back. Some betrayals cut too deep for simple reconciliation. Yet as I watched the sunset over the gardens Philippe and I had planted together 30 years ago, I realized something important. Despite everything, I survived. My life isn't what I thought it would be. The husband I mourned wasn't the man I thought I knew. The daughter I raised became someone I never imagined. But I'm still here, stronger than before. If you're facing betrayal from those closest to you, remember this: the truth always surfaces eventually. And when it does, make sure you're standing on solid ground.